When we talk about democracy, we're talking about rule by the people. It's a simple concept to define, but it's been incredibly complicated to achieve. Democracy isn't something that was invented one afternoon. It's the result of a long, often messy, 2,500-year journey. Every time a new group of people demanded a greater voice or a powerful ruler's authority was challenged, the idea of democracy took one more step forward. It's a story we need to understand to appreciate the system we have today. Before democracy, most societies were ruled by single powerful figures, whether kings, pharaohs, or emperors. However, even in these early times, we see the very first sparks of modern ideas. Consider the Code of Hammurabi, written in ancient Babylonia. For the first time, laws were written down and made public. This was revolutionary because it established the idea that even the most powerful people had to follow a set of written rules. It was the earliest foundation of the rule of law. Ancient Israel also contributed a powerful ethical dimension to the Western tradition. Their focus on the covenant, an agreement between God and the people, introduced a strong sense of moral responsibility. More importantly, this tradition held that the law came from a divine source, meaning it applied universally. If the law is universal, then even the king is bound by it, reinforcing the idea that no person, regardless of their status, is above the fundamental rules of society. The word democracy itself comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratos, meaning power or rule. The place where this idea truly took root was the city-state of Athens in Greece, around the 5th century BC. Now, keep in mind, Athens was small, and it had a lot of problems, but it was the first place in the world where political decisions were made by the citizens, not by a single monarch or a small noble class. The Athenians invented direct democracy. Imagine if you and all your peers had to vote on every single school rule, every spending decision, and every policy. That's what the male citizens of Athens did in the assembly or the ecclesia. They gathered on a hillside and debated and voted directly on every law. This was an intense, personal form of democracy that required constant participation. They even had a system called ostracism, where they could vote to exile a politician they thought was becoming too powerful or dangerous. Two key figures shaped this Athenian experiment. Solon, in the 6th century BC, reformed the system to be less aristocratic by basing political rights on wealth rather than noble birth. Then came Cleisthenes, often called the father of Athenian democracy. He organized citizens into new tribes and councils, breaking up the power of old noble families and creating a truly democratic structure that gave more people a genuine voice. But we have to be clear, Athenian democracy was far from perfect by our modern standards. When we say rule by the people were actually a very small group. Women, slaves, and foreigners living in Athens were all completely excluded from citizenship and the voting process. When we compare it to modern systems, it serves as a powerful reminder that the fight to expand the definition of the people is a core part of democracy's history. A few centuries later, the Romans developed a different, equally important form of government, the Republic. Instead of a direct democracy where everyone voted on every issue, the Roman citizens elected representatives, like the senators, to make the decisions for them. This representative democracy model proved far more practical for ruling a vast territory, and is the direct inspiration for how the United States government is structured today. The Romans are famous for their law and order. The concept that citizens deserved fair legal treatment was made public with the 12 Tables. This was the first time Roman laws were written down and publicly displayed for all free citizens to see. It meant everyone could know the law and be protected by it. Crucially, the Roman tradition planted the seed for concepts like due process and the right to a fair trial, which are cornerstones of modern law. Sadly, the Roman Republic didn't last forever. Power-hungry generals and internal corruption caused the Republic to fall, replaced by the Roman Empire, which was a dictatorship ruled by an emperor. After the entire Roman Empire collapsed, Europe fell into the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages. Political power was decentralized, held by local feudal lords and the powerful Catholic Church, and the ideas of citizen participation largely disappeared. For centuries, kings and monarchs ruled supreme, claiming absolute power. But in 1215 in England, the nobles finally had enough. They cornered King John and forced him to sign the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. This was an earth-shattering moment because it was the first time a document formally stated that the king's power was not absolute. He was subject to the law, just like everyone else. The Magna Carta introduced several principles that are vital to democracy today. First, it reinforced the rule of law, meaning everyone is accountable under the law. Second, it required due process, the right to a fair legal proceeding. And perhaps most importantly, it established that the king couldn't just raise new taxes without consulting the nobles. This consultation body eventually became the Parliament. That small advisory group of nobles that King John had to consult gradually evolved into the English Parliament. Over the next several hundred years, Parliament chipped away at the monarch's authority. Through civil wars and political struggles, Parliament became the true center of power, moving England from an absolute monarchy where the king holds all power to a limited monarchy, where the king is merely a figurehead. The journey of democracy got a huge boost in the 17th and 18th centuries with the Enlightenment. This was a period when brilliant philosophers started using reason and logic to challenge old traditions and institutions. They didn't just accept that kings ruled by divine right. They asked why governments existed and what their purpose was. Their ideas became the blueprint for the creation of modern democratic nations. The English philosopher John Locke was one of the most important voices of the Enlightenment. He argued that every person is born with natural rights, life, liberty, and property that cannot be taken away. He theorized that government is a social contract between the ruler and the ruled. The ruler promises to protect the people's rights, and if the ruler fails, the people have the right to change that government. A French philosopher named Montesquieu looked at the problems of concentrated power. He observed that if one person or group holds the power to make, enforce, and judge laws, it will inevitably lead to tyranny. His great solution was the separation of powers. The government must be divided into 3 distinct branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, to ensure that power is balanced and no single branch can become too dominant. Another crucial Enlightenment thinker was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He focused on the concept of the general will. He believed that the government should always be focused on the common good, what is best for the community as a whole, not just the interests of a few powerful individuals. Rousseau advocated for strong civic engagement, where citizens actively participate in shaping the laws, drawing inspiration from the old Athenian direct democracy. The American Revolution wasn't just a tax revolt. It was the world's first major attempt to build a nation entirely upon Enlightenment principles. The Declaration of Independence is full of Locke's ideas. It asserts that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and if the government becomes destructive, the people have a right to change it. This was the moment democratic theory became political reality on a massive scale. The U.S. Constitution took the ideas of the past and combined them into a working system. It established a federal republic, borrowing the representative idea from the Romans. It built in Montesquieu's separation of powers and the necessary checks and balances to prevent any one branch from seizing control. The Constitution is a master blend of historical lessons, creating a stable, written framework for the world's longest-lasting modern democracy. The story of democracy doesn't end with the U.S. Constitution. In many ways, it only begins. The evolution continues through the abolition of slavery, the women's suffrage movement, the civil rights movement, and all the struggles for voting rights that still happen today. Democracy is a process, not a destination. It requires every generation to participate, advocate, and expand its definition so that rule by the people truly includes all the people.